Jeffrey, who is he? Jeffrey Epstein. A man whose name alone sends shivers through the corridors of power. Who was he? How did he build a web that trapped the rich, the famous, and the vulnerable? Tonight, we uncover the truth. In the shadows of global power, behind the walls of private mansions, and across the runways of secret airstrips, one man built a network so vast, so protected, that for decades, he seemed untouchable. His name was Jeffrey Epstein. A financier with no clear clients. A billionaire with mysterious wealth. And a convicted sex offender who moved freely among presidents, princes, and the richest people on earth. This is not just the story of one criminal. This is the story of power, influence, silence, and the victims left behind. Tonight, we follow the documented record. Court files, testimonies, flight logs, and official investigations. To understand how Jeffrey Epstein rose, who surrounded him, and what the world now knows. Who was Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Edward Epstein was born in 1953 in Brooklyn, New York. He began as a math teacher at an elite private school, then somehow climbed into the world of high finance. Despite having no college degree. By the 1980s, Epstein claimed to manage money for billionaires. Yet even investigators later admitted, backhand index pointing right, no clear list of real clients was ever found. He owned a 7-story mansion in Manhattan, a luxury estate in Palm Beach, Florida, homes in Paris and New Mexico, and most infamously, backhand index pointing right, a private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Little St. James. To outsiders, Epstein looked like a mysterious genius investor. To law enforcement, he would become one of the most notorious sex traffickers in modern history. The first victims speak. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, disturbing reports began to surface. Teenage girls, some as young as 14, told police they were recruited to give massages at Epstein's Palm Beach mansion. They said, they were paid cash. Then pressured into sexual acts. And told to bring more girls. This was not random abuse. It was systematic grooming. Girls were, heavy checkmark, lured with money. Heavy checkmark, isolated. Heavy checkmark, manipulated. Heavy checkmark, and passed upward through the network. In 2005, one victim's family finally went to police. What followed shocked even veteran investigators. Police built a case with dozens of victims, witness statements, and evidence of abuse of minors. Epstein was arrested in 2006. But then, something extraordinary happened. The deal that let him walk. In 2008, Epstein struck a secret plea deal with federal prosecutors. Instead of facing federal sex trafficking charges, which could have meant life in prison, backhand index pointing right, Epstein pleaded guilty to minor state charges. His punishment: 18 months in jail. He served only 13 months. And was allowed to leave jail 6 days a week for work release. Victims were not told about the deal. Years later, a federal judge would rule that this agreement violated victims' rights. Many legal experts called it one of the most shocking examples of backhand index pointing right special treatment for the powerful in U.S. history. After his release, Epstein went back to his mansions. Back to his jets. Back to his elite friends. And, according to later accusations, backhand index pointing right back to abusing girls, the private jets, and the island. Epstein owned multiple private planes. One of them became infamous, airplane, a Boeing 727, nicknamed the Lolita Express. Flight logs later made public in court cases show Epstein flying powerful guests across the world: New York, Florida, Paris, the Caribbean, and often, backhand index pointing right to Little St. James Island. Victims later testified that, they were flown there as minors, forced to perform sexual acts, and made to feel trapped, with no escape. Because it was an island, surrounded by water, guarded, private. Locals would later call it, Speaking Head Pedophile Island. This island would become the darkest symbol of Epstein's hidden empire. But Epstein was not alone. Behind him stood a woman who helped recruit, groom, and manage the girls. Her name, backhand index pointing right, Ghislaine Maxwell. In part 2, we will cover Ghislaine Maxwell's role, how the network really worked, the 2019 arrest, and Epstein's mysterious death in jail. Behind Jeffrey Epstein stood a woman from high society. Her name was Ghislaine Maxwell. Born into British wealth and privilege, daughter of publishing tycoon Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine moved easily among royalty, politicians, and billionaires. But in Epstein's world, backhand index pointing right, she became something else. Victims later testified that Maxwell approached them as a friendly mentor, gained their trust, then introduced them to Epstein. She taught girls how to massage Epstein, how to please him, and how to stay silent. For years, Maxwell denied everything. But in 2021, a federal jury convicted her of heavy checkmark sex trafficking of minors, heavy checkmark conspiracy, heavy checkmark transporting girls for abuse. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. The court declared, Speaking Head, she was not just a bystander. She was a key part of the system. How the system worked. Epstein's operation was not random. It followed a pattern seen in organized trafficking networks. Girls were heavy checkmark recruited young, heavy checkmark paid small amounts, heavy checkmark then told to bring friends, heavy checkmark and slowly pushed into abuse. This created a pyramid of victims, where some girls were pressured into becoming recruiters themselves. Homes in Palm Beach, Manhattan, New Mexico, and the Virgin Islands all became crime scenes described in lawsuits. Victims said they were watched, controlled, and reminded that Epstein was too powerful to stop. Many were told, Speaking Head, no one will believe you. He knows important people. And for a long time, that seemed true. The return of the case 2019 arrest. In July 2019, after years of investigative journalism and pressure, federal prosecutors in New York arrested Jeffrey Epstein again. This time, no secret deals. He was charged with backhand index pointing right sex trafficking of minors, backhand index pointing right conspiracy. The indictment described dozens of victims, abuse in multiple states, and a network spanning years. Epstein pleaded not guilty. He was denied bail and sent to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York. For the first time, it looked like Epstein might finally face full justice. But he never reached trial. Death in a jail cell. On August 10, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his cell. The official ruling, backhand index pointing right, suicide by hanging. But almost immediately, questions exploded. Guards had fallen asleep. Cameras malfunctioned. Epstein had been taken off suicide watch. Later, 2 guards were charged with falsifying records. To many around the world, Epstein's death felt like, Speaking Head, the final door slamming shut on the full truth. No trial. No public testimony. No cross-examination. Just silence. And the victims, left without seeing him held fully accountable. The powerful names appear. After Epstein's death, attention turned to one burning question, backhand index pointing right: who else was involved? Court records, flight logs, contact books, and testimonies revealed names of powerful people who had associations with Epstein. Important to say clearly, warning: being named does not mean guilt. But the public demanded transparency. Among the most discussed names, Red Square Donald Trump. Trump and Epstein were photographed together in the 1990s. Trump once called Epstein a terrific guy in an old interview. Later, Trump said, he cut ties with Epstein years before the arrest. He barred him from Mar-a-Lago. No evidence has shown Trump was charged or accused by victims in Epstein's criminal case. His name appears in heavy checkmark photos, heavy checkmark social records, heavy checkmark and subpoenas for information. But as of now, backhand index pointing right: no criminal charges link Trump to Epstein's crimes. Blue Square Bill Clinton. Flight logs show Clinton flew on Epstein's plane multiple times. Clinton has said, he knew nothing of Epstein's crimes, and was on trips related to charity work. Again, backhand index pointing right: no criminal charges against Clinton connected to Epstein. Green Square Bill Gates. Gates admitted he met Epstein several times after Epstein's 2008 conviction. Gates later said, speaking head, it was a mistake to associate with him. He denied any involvement in wrongdoing. There is, crossmark, no evidence. Crossmark, no charges. Crossmark, no victim testimony linking Gates to Epstein's crimes. Yellow Square Prince Andrew. The British royal was accused in civil court by Virginia Giuffre. He denied wrongdoing, but later, backhand index pointing right settled the case out of court in 2022. No criminal trial followed, but the settlement damaged his public role and status. There were many other names: actors, scientists, politicians, billionaires, some confirmed social contact. Some denied knowing Epstein well. Some said they cut ties years earlier. What mattered most was this: backhand index pointing right: Epstein surrounded himself with power. And that power protected him for a very long time. In Part 3, we will explore survivor testimonies in detail, the Epstein Files and document releases, what those files really show, and what remains hidden. For years, the most important voices were the quietest. The girls who became women, carrying trauma few could imagine. One of the most well-known survivors is Virginia Giuffre. She said she was recruited at age 16. While working at Mar-a-Lago. Then taken into Epstein's world by Ghislaine Maxwell. Virginia testified she was trafficked to powerful men, across countries and properties. Others known in court as Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2, and more, described eerily similar patterns: heavy checkmark cash payments, heavy checkmark sexual abuse, heavy checkmark pressure to recruit friends, heavy checkmark threats that Epstein was untouchable. Their stories formed the backbone of civil lawsuits and criminal charges. For many survivors, justice was not just about prison, it was about being believed. The Epstein Files. What was released? After Epstein's death and Maxwell's conviction, public pressure grew louder. Speaking head released the files. In response, courts and later the U.S. government began unsealing depositions, emails, flight logs, address books, and photographs, often called backhand index pointing right: the Epstein Files. These documents did not form a single list of criminals. Instead, they revealed who met Epstein, who traveled with him, who appeared in contact books, and who was mentioned by witnesses. Some names appeared dozens of times, others only once. But every name triggered questions. Yet judges repeatedly warning a name in the files does not mean guilt. Many were heavy checkmark witnesses, heavy checkmark social contacts, heavy checkmark or people Epstein wanted to impress. Still, the secrecy itself fueled public anger. Why had so much stayed hidden for so long? Power, protection, and silence. Investigations showed a disturbing truth: Epstein had high-priced lawyers, connections to politicians, relationships with influential figures, and an image of extreme wealth. This gave him something powerful: backhand index pointing right leverage. Victims said he told them, speaking head, I own people. I can make problems disappear. And for years, that seemed real. The 2008 plea deal. The lack of federal charges. The continued freedom. To many survivors, it felt like the system chose power over children. Journalists later called it, newspaper, a failure of justice on a historic scale. What we still don't know. Even after thousands of pages of documents, major questions remain. Who funded Epstein's wealth? Did anyone else actively participate in the crimes? Were there blackmail operations? Why were early warnings ignored? There is no confirmed public list of co-conspirators. No proven global blackmail ring in court. And no completed accounting of Epstein's finances. What we have instead is a mountain of partial answers, and a silence left by Epstein's death. Toward accountability. Maxwell sits in prison. Epstein is dead. Some civil cases ended in settlements. But many survivors say, speaking head, justice feels unfinished. They want heavy checkmark full transparency. Heavy checkmark real accountability. Heavy checkmark and systemic change. Because this case was never just about one man. It was about backhand index pointing right, how power can protect evil, until light finally breaks through. The final segment, we will reflect on the legacy of the Epstein scandal, address myths vs facts, and close with what this story means for the future. Few cases in modern history have generated as many rumors as Jeffrey Epstein's. So let us be clear. Fact: heavy checkmark, Epstein was a convicted sex offender and federally charged sex trafficker. Heavy checkmark, dozens of victims have testified under oath. Heavy checkmark, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted and sentenced to prison. Fact: heavy checkmark, powerful people associated socially with Epstein. Heavy checkmark, their names appear in logs, photos, and documents. But also fact: there is no public evidence that most of those named, including Donald Trump or Bill Gates, were charged or convicted in Epstein's crimes. A name in a file does not equal guilt. Photos do not prove participation in abuse. Truth matters. Because when rumors replace evidence, real justice gets buried. And the survivors deserve better than that. The legacy of the scandal. The Epstein case changed more than courtrooms. It exposed how wealth can bend justice, how silence can protect predators, and how institutions can fail the vulnerable. It forced new laws, new transparency rules, new scrutiny of secret deals. And it reminded the world that, backhand index pointing right, even the most powerful must be questioned. But it also left a scar. Because Epstein died before trial. and many answers died with him. For survivors, justice was partial. For society, trust was shaken. Final words. This story is not just about Jeffrey Epstein. It is about every voice ignored, every warning dismissed, every child who was not protected. And it is about what happens when courage finally breaks silence. Power did not save Epstein forever. And truth, though delayed, still matters. May this story remind us that no matter how rich, how connected, or how protected someone seems, backhand index pointing right justice must never belong only to the powerful.